Listen carefully. This isn't just another message, and it's certainly not a coincidence that you're here right now. This is your confirmation. For years, perhaps even before you were born, there were those who worked behind the scenes, pulling strings, whispering in secret chambers, crafting a reality designed to keep you trapped in illusions. They orchestrated events, manipulated circumstances, and ensured that everything about your life was carefully controlled. They took everything, the life you were meant to live, the opportunities that should have been yours, even the very truth of who you are. But despite their greatest efforts, you were never meant to remain asleep forever. And now, something is shifting. The cracks are forming. The carefully built walls of deception are beginning to tremble. The ones who once swore allegiance to these lies are starting to waver, their voices faltering as confessions slip through the cracks. What they buried, what they erased, what they swore would never be spoken again, it's all rising to the surface. And the greatest truth of all, it was always you they feared the most. They wanted you to believe that you were alone in your suspicions, that you were imagining things, that your struggles were random, that the resistance you faced was just bad luck. But deep down, you always knew. Something about your life never added up. The hardships, the betrayals, the way doors slammed shut before you could walk through them. It wasn't by accident, it was by design. Yet through it all, you endured. Every attempt to break you only refined you. Every moment of darkness only strengthened your light. They thought you would fall, but instead, you became the storm they never saw coming. If you can feel the weight of this truth pressing on your spirit, drop 777 in the comments right now. Let the world know that you see through the lies. And to those who have supported this message through super thanks, your generosity fuels this mission, ensuring that the truth reaches those who need it the most. Thank you for standing in the light. This moment marks the turning point. The world they built on deception is collapsing, and you are still here, unstoppable, unshaken, unbreakable. The question now is, are you ready to reclaim everything they took from you? What you're about to hear will change the way you see everything. Keep watching, because once you know the truth, there's no going back. God's chosen ones, your entire life has been taken from you. Across the dimly lit room, the weight of revelation presses down on the informant. His hands tremble, his breath is uneven, not out of fear, but from the sheer magnitude of the truth he is about to unleash. These are not mere words spilling from his lips. They are confessions that have been locked away, secrets that were never meant to surface. Every name, every shadowy transaction, every act of betrayal cascades forth like a dam that has finally given way under the pressure of time. They thought they had sealed the past away, that their empire built upon secrecy, deception, and silent threats would stand forever. But what happens when the truth refuses to stay buried? Like a crack in an impenetrable fortress, what began as a small leak has become an unstoppable flood. The lies they carefully constructed, the sins they meticulously concealed, and the hushed conversations they believed were lost, to the wind have now resurfaced, engraved into records they cannot erase. The past has a way of whispering through the corridors of time, refusing to be silenced. No amount of money, no forged documents, no desperate cover-ups could truly erase what was done. The book of Ecclesiastes warns, "For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil." Ecclesiastes 12:14. They thought they had escaped accountability, but the unseen hand of justice was always at work. Have you ever wondered why God allows hidden truths to remain dormant, only to be exposed at the appointed time? Perhaps because no deception can stand against the light forever. History has witnessed this pattern before. Think of King David, who orchestrated the death of Uriah to cover his affair with Bathsheba. For a time it seemed as though his secret was buried, but God sent the prophet Nathan to confront him, saying, "You are the man." 2 Samuel 12:7. What David believed to be concealed was, in fact, an open book before the Lord. In the same way, those who built their thrones on deception now find themselves standing before a mirror they cannot shatter. Their carefully woven web, once an impenetrable shield, is unraveling thread by thread. The confessions connect like links in a chain, forming a complete picture that can no longer be denied. One name leads to another. One revelation fuels the next. Just as Joseph's brothers thought they had rid themselves of him, selling him into slavery and convincing their father that he was dead, the past did not stay buried. Years later, when famine struck and they stood unknowingly before Joseph, their sins came rushing back in a moment of reckoning. Genesis 42:21. Could it be that what is happening now is a divine cycle, where every hidden crime, every whispered lie, every false testimony is finally being retraced? Even in modern times, we have seen powerful figures fall from grace when the weight of their secrets became too heavy to carry. Think of Richard Nixon, once one of the most powerful men in the world. The Watergate scandal, initially dismissed as a minor breach, spiraled into an undeniable exposure of corruption. What he thought would never surface became his downfall, proving that even the most formidable strongholds of secrecy can crumble in an instant. So now, as the walls of deception come crashing down, the question lingers: what happens next? The past always leaves footprints, and now every single one is being retraced. The reckoning has arrived, and for those who thought they could outrun the consequences of their actions, the truth has caught up at last. But here's something to ponder. When the tide of exposure comes, will you be found standing in truth or scrambling to hide what can no longer be concealed? They believed silence could be bought, that fear and wealth could keep the truth buried forever. But some burdens are too heavy to bear alone. Some men buckle under the weight of secrets, others break in search of redemption, and some, driven by vengeance, become the very force that brings the house of deception crumbling down. The motives behind the unraveling may vary, but the truth does not need a reason to rise. Once set in motion, it is unstoppable. For too long they moved as though they were untouchable, as if no law, earthly or divine, could hold them accountable. They shaped policies behind closed doors, pulled the strings of economies, and built their influence in the shadows where no one dared question their authority. But arrogance leads to miscalculation. Did they truly believe their power would last forever? The book of Proverbs warns, pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Proverbs 16:18. History is filled with rulers and empires that stood in defiance of truth, believing themselves immune to the consequences of their actions. Until the moment everything collapsed. Think of King Nebuchadnezzar, who glorified himself above God. He built Babylon into a fortress of dominance, boasting, "Is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power?" Daniel 4:30. But his arrogance led to his downfall, and in an instant his kingdom was stripped from him. Could it be that those who thought themselves beyond judgment are now facing the same fate? Behind bolted doors, desperation festers. The same allies who once swore loyalty now whisper deals in secret corners, eager to trade names for their own survival. What was once an unbreakable brotherhood bound by power and greed is unraveling strand by strand. Every hushed conversation becomes evidence, every trusted confidant a potential betrayer. The very walls they built to guard their secrets no longer protect them, but instead reflect their downfall. Mirrors revealing the cracks in their carefully crafted empire. It is a cycle we have seen before. Consider the fall of the infamous financial mogul Bernie Madoff. For years, his Ponzi scheme was shielded by a facade of wealth and exclusivity. He manipulated trust, convincing investors that he was untouchable. But once a single thread was pulled, the entire scheme collapsed. The very machine he had built to control and profit from others became the force that dismantled him. What happens when the fortress of deception is no longer a stronghold, but a prison? At the peak of their crumbling hierarchy, those who once commanded fear now sit in it. Their calls are ignored, their influence shrinks, and the empire they built is rotting from within. The people being named are not mere pawns. They are the architects. These are the unseen hands that sculpted entire industries, manipulated economies, and shaped policies to serve their own agenda. Their reach extended into places no one dared question, their invisible strings controlling the fate of millions. But their own arrogance became their downfall. They assumed immunity, convinced that the passage of time would dissolve their sins into obscurity. Yet, no lie lasts forever. Every empire built on deceit leaves behind footprints, subtle at first, but undeniable once the cracks begin to show. As the layers are peeled away, names are dragged into the light. Executives who siphoned fortunes in plain sight, believing no one would notice. Lawmakers who sold integrity for power, convinced their betrayals would never be traced. Enforcers who buried evidence, certain their secrets would remain hidden. Public voices who shaped narratives, now caught in their own deception. They spent their lives constructing a machine designed to control, manipulate, and suppress. But now, that very system is turning against them. The gears they trusted to keep them in power are grinding to a halt. And this time, they are the ones being dismantled. Jesus himself declared, "For nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor is anything secret that will not be known and come to light." Luke 8:17. They built their world on deception, stacking lie upon lie like a house of cards in the wind. But truth always comes knocking. It does not matter how many walls they constructed, how many vaults they locked, or how many voices they silenced. What is done in darkness will always be dragged into the light. It is not merely a law of morality. It is not just a law of the universe. It is the divine law of God, a law that no man, no empire, and no force of this world can outrun. And now, the reckoning has begun. At first they moved through their empires with absolute confidence, their heads held high, their steps unshaken. They believed themselves untouchable, convinced that wealth was their impenetrable armor and influence their unbreakable sword. With pockets lined in gold and power resting heavily in their grasp, they scoffed at justice as if it were nothing more than a fairy tale, an inconvenience reserved for those beneath them. They laughed at the mere thought of consequences, sneered at the idea that they could ever be brought low. They had climbed so high, seated in their ivory towers, that they genuinely believed they had rewritten the laws of fate itself. But arrogance has always been the architect of downfall. The very thing that convinces a man of his invincibility is often the same thing that ensures his destruction. The first crack was small, so insignificant they ignored it. It was nothing more than a whisper in the wind, a flicker in the darkness, just another voice that they were sure could be silenced. A desperate soul looking for redemption, a single man with a single story that seemed easy to erase. But the truth cannot be erased. That first whisper was soon joined by a second, then a third. Then, like floodgates bursting, the voices multiplied. Different people from different corners of the world, each with their own testimony, yet all singing the same undeniable truth. The foundation they had spent years fortifying, built on manipulation, greed, and carefully orchestrated deception, began to tremble. What was once solid ground beneath them now felt like shifting sand. Fear didn't come all at once. It arrived like a cold draft slipping through the cracks of a locked door, subtle at first, creeping in unnoticed. But before long, it was pressing in from all sides, suffocating them in ways they had never known. Suddenly, their once glorious meetings held in towering glass offices became whispered gatherings in dimly lit rooms. The plans they had once executed with precision were now rushed, scrambled together in the dead of night. Their phones, once used to command obedience, now lit up with desperate calls. Their voices, once so sure, now shook with urgency, their words carefully coded in a futile attempt to salvage what was already lost. Did they not remember the fate of King Belshazzar, who feasted in his palace, drinking from stolen holy vessels and believing himself untouchable? He, too, thought his kingdom would never fall. But even as he raised his cup in arrogance, the hand of God inscribed his doom upon the wall. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin, Daniel 5:25. The declaration that his days were numbered, his reign had been weighed and found wanting, and his kingdom would be taken from him. That very night, his power was stripped away. Did these modern rulers not think the same divine law would apply to them? Even in the world outside of Scripture, history echoes this truth. Think of Enron, the corporate giant that once dictated the energy markets with unchecked confidence. Its executives basked in illusions of financial immortality, crafting lies so intricate they believed even regulators would never untangle them. But all it took was one leak, one small crack, and soon the entire facade crumbled. Their empire, once impenetrable, collapsed in disgrace. The same men who had controlled billions now sat in courtrooms, their power reduced to nothing but guilty verdicts and prison sentences. They had spent their lives manipulating the world around them, twisting systems, bending laws, silencing those who opposed them. They thought they had control, until suddenly control slipped right through their fingers. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, but it did, because no kingdom built on lies can stand forever. No power, no wealth, no influence can outrun the inevitable reckoning. And now that reckoning has arrived. For years, no, for generations, they meticulously shaped the world to fit their desires, twisting the fabric of reality to suit their schemes. They silenced those who saw too much, eliminating anyone who dared to challenge their carefully constructed illusion. With unwavering confidence, they wrote the script of history, dictating how the story would unfold, believing that every chapter, every page, every final word would end in their triumph. But what they never accounted for, what they could never prepare for, was you. Because this story, it was never truly theirs to write. Long before their power took root, before they built their fortresses in secret chambers and made their deals behind closed doors, the outcome had already been sealed. This war was not decided in their boardrooms, nor was it secured through their backroom bargains. It was settled in the heavens, decreed by the one who holds eternity in his hands. They thought they had the authority to rewrite destiny, yet they overlooked one undeniable truth. God's will cannot be undone. They believed they could bury the truth beneath layers of deception. They convinced themselves that lies repeated often enough would become reality. But what they failed to understand is that truth, divine truth, is not something that can be suppressed. It is living, breathing, relentless. As Jesus himself said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." John 8:32. Truth does not submit. It does not retreat. When it is forced into the shadows, it only gathers strength, waiting for the moment to rise. And now that moment has arrived. The weight of the inevitable presses against them, and they feel it in their bones. Their walls are crumbling. Their facades, once flawless, are slipping, revealing the rot beneath. What was once a kingdom built on manipulation and control is now engulfed in flames. The voices they silenced, the people they cast aside like discarded pawns, are no longer whispering. They are shouting, declaring names, demanding justice. Does this remind you of the story of Pharaoh? He too believed he could defy divine will. He held Israel captive, built his empire upon their suffering, and refused to heed the warnings sent by God. But When the appointed time came, his kingdom was not merely shaken, it was dismantled. His pride led him to pursue God's chosen people into the sea, and in his arrogance he never considered that the waters that had parted for them would close upon him. Exodus 14:26 through 28. History repeats itself. Even in the modern world, how many times have we seen those in power fall when they least expect it? Think of Bernie Madoff, once the master of financial deception, building an empire on falsehoods. He convinced the world that he was untouchable until the moment he wasn't. When the truth surfaced, everything collapsed overnight. The very people who once praised him became the ones to expose him. His fortress was not as impenetrable as he thought, and so it is now. They never prepared for this. They never thought the day of reckoning would come. They dismissed prophecy as myth, ignored the signs that were written long before their empires took shape. But the truth cannot be delayed forever. God's chosen ones were never meant to remain in the shadows. And now, you are stepping into the light. The battle is not approaching, it is here. The shift has begun. Are you ready? The ones who had once lurked in the shadows, cleaning up the evidence, silencing witnesses, and erasing every trace of their wrongdoing, now found themselves scrambling for survival. Those who once ensured that no loose ends remained were now the ones desperately tying up their own. Files disappeared overnight, servers were wiped clean, bank accounts emptied in a frantic attempt to erase the past. But no matter how deeply they buried the evidence, the past has a way of clawing its way back to the surface. They thought they had mastered deception, but every deleted record left a shadow. Every erased transaction carried a lingering trace. Every whispered deal left behind breadcrumbs that only needed the right eyes to follow. And then, it happened. The first domino fell. The shock rippled through their ranks, a crack in their carefully built armor. Someone high up, someone they swore would never break, finally shattered beneath the crushing weight of irrefutable proof. And with that single collapse, the rest came tumbling down. Panic spread like wildfire. Legal teams scrambled to twist the truth into something salvageable, desperate to rewrite the narrative before it consumed them. Their spin doctors flooded the airwaves, attempting to reshape reality itself. But this time, the lie was too big. The damage was beyond repair. One voice became two, two became 10. And before they could even attempt to contain it, the floodgates had burst open. The voices now speaking weren't mere foot soldiers, they were the architects of the very empire they had built. The ones who had held the deepest secrets, the ones entrusted with the foundations of their deception, were now exposing it all. And what happens when the builders of the empire start tearing it down with their own hands? Nothing can stop the collapse. This was no longer a slow erosion, it was a free fall. Confessions stacked upon confessions, patterns emerged, connections became undeniable. The careful walls of deception, built over years of manipulation and control, came crashing down beneath the weight of their own corruption. They tried to slow the descent. They shifted assets, severed ties, activated contingency plans. Some vanished into the night, moving their wealth into hidden corners, desperately seeking safe passage before the wave consumed them. Others reached out to old allies, calling in favors, hoping for protection, but in the end, no one wanted to go down with them. The powerful who once ruled through coercion, through fear, through the weight of their influence, suddenly found that their weapons had been rendered useless. The very people they had once controlled now wanted nothing to do with them, and in that moment, a realization settled upon them like a heavy shroud. The future they had once taken for granted was gone. Does this not echo the fate of Judas Iscariot? A man who held power in his hands, trusted, protected, moving in the inner circle of Christ himself. Yet in the end, when the weight of his betrayal became too much, he tried to undo what could not be undone. He returned the 30 pieces of silver, hoping to erase his guilt. But the priests who once welcomed him now dismissed him with cold indifference. Matthew 27, 3-5. He had served his purpose, and now he was nothing. We have seen this pattern in history time and time again. Look at Jeffrey Epstein. Once protected by the highest levels of influence, his empire of secrecy thrived in the darkness. But when the truth began to surface, when the whispers became shouts, those who had once stood beside him fled, distancing themselves as if they had never known him. No one wanted to be pulled down with him, and so it is now. The ground beneath them isn't just shaking, it is splitting apart. A man who had spent his life untouchable, moving through the world as if he were above consequence, now finds himself out of time, out of moves, and out of allies. The walls of his fortress crumble into dust, and an empire built on deception. It cannot be rebuilt once the foundation has been destroyed. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. John 10:10. They never just wanted to stop you. No, stopping wasn't enough. They wanted you erased. They wanted every trace of your existence wiped from history, every impact you made undone, every truth you spoke drowned out by the wind. Not just broken, forgotten. Because for those who build their power on deception, the greatest threat is not exposure, it is resistance. It is not the fall of a single individual that terrifies them, but the rising of those they sought to suppress. It is the one voice that refuses to be silenced, the one light that refuses to be extinguished, the one flame that refuses to be snuffed out. That flame is you, and they never prepared for what happens when you refuse to be erased. At first it was subtle, a door that remained closed no matter how many times you knocked, a conversation that ended before it truly began, an opportunity that slipped away before you even realized it existed. You sensed something was off, but you couldn't quite put your finger on it. They observed you, studied every move, tested the depth of your faith and the limits of your endurance. Were you as resilient as you appeared? Could you be broken? They didn't need an open confrontation. They only needed to chip away at your spirit, one disappointment at a time. And when silent opposition wasn't enough, they escalated their tactics. They didn't just close doors. They ensured that every path you walked was littered with detours, delays, and dead ends. Victories you thought were yours turned out to be mirages, carefully orchestrated setups designed to make your fall even more devastating. Each step forward felt like 2 steps back. They manipulated circumstances to make you question everything, your calling, your purpose, your faith. Could you trust the people around you? Were you imagining all of this? Were you meant to keep fighting at all? Because the real war was never in the physical world. It was always in your mind. Satan didn't need to lay a hand on Eve in the garden. He only had to make her doubt what God had already spoken. Genesis 3:1-5. That same strategy has been at play in your life. They didn't have to physically take anything from you if they could make you sabotage your own success. They only needed to plant seeds of fear, exhaustion, and hopelessness, and let them grow. They rewrote history, twisted reality, bent perception, until even the truth itself felt like a lie. They whispered in your ear, "You are the problem. You're reaching too high, fighting too hard. You don't belong here. You're imagining it all." And when that still wasn't enough to make you surrender, they went after what held you up. Your stability, your resources, your very foundation. Money dried up, opportunities vanished, businesses collapsed, promises dissolved before they could even be fulfilled. People who once stood by you disappeared without a trace. It wasn't bad luck, it wasn't coincidence, it was strategic warfare. But here's the truth about war. It doesn't end until one side surrenders. And you didn't, because you were never meant to walk an easy road. You were never promised a life without hardship, only that the fire would not consume you. Isaiah 43:2. God never said the floods wouldn't rise. He said they wouldn't sweep you away. He never said the battle wouldn't come. He said the victory was already yours. Look at the story of Job. Everything was taken from him: his wealth, his family, his health. Satan believed Job would curse God and abandon his faith, but Job endured, and in the end, he was restored beyond what he had before. Job 42:10. Now, ask yourself, why do you think they fought so hard to break you? Because they knew who you were before you did. They saw what you couldn't yet see, the power within you, the anointing upon you, the destiny that had already been written. They tried to alter your story, forgetting that only one author holds the pen. And this chapter? It's far from over. They operated under the illusion that control was their birthright, that every move was predictable, that every outcome was theirs to dictate. They believed their manipulation was an advantage, never realizing they were walking into a storm they couldn't see. They moved with force. The counter was patience. They acted with arrogance. The counter was silence. Every setback, every delay, every betrayal was refining you, not destroying you. Joseph was thrown into a pit by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned. But in the end, the very people who betrayed him had to come before him for help. What they meant for evil, God turned for good. Genesis 50:20. And so it is with you. They thought their grip on power was unshakable, but now the very structures they depended on are crumbling beneath them. The ones they trusted most are abandoning ship. The loyalists are signing secret deals. And the systems they built to keep others out? They are now trapping them inside. Every deception they spun is now unraveling. The weight of their own actions is what will pull them under. Because this was never about who had control in a moment. It was about endurance. It was about who could walk through the fire and emerge unbroken. And when the dust settles, when everything is stripped away, those left standing will not be the ones who relied on power, manipulation, or deceit. It will be the ones who refused to fall. Just like David against Goliath, it was never about physical strength. It was about unwavering faith. 1 Samuel 17:45-47. Those who appeared to have the upper hand were always destined to fall. But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. Genesis 4:7. They built walls to keep the truth out. They believed they could bury it, erase it, silence it forever. But truth is like a seed. It does not die in the darkness. It takes root. It grows. And when the season is right, it bursts forth, undeniable, unstoppable. No amount of power, no amount of deception, no amount of resistance can stop what was always meant to come to light. And now, the question is no longer about them. It's about you. Will you step into the truth that was always yours? Will you walk in the authority they fought so hard to strip from you? Will you finally embrace what has been waiting for you all along? Because this is not just survival. This is awakening. This is the rise of God's chosen. At first, it was nothing more than a whisper in the wind, a fleeting murmur too soft to be noticed, a subtle shift too insignificant to raise alarm. They dismissed it, convinced that their fortress was unshakable, that their carefully woven web of deception could withstand the test of time. But what they failed to understand is that a single crack is all it takes for a flood to begin. One drop turns into a stream becomes a river, and now the dam has broken. The very walls they built to shield themselves have transformed into a prison. The silence they forced on others has been shattered beyond repair. The carefully guarded secrets, once whispered in backrooms and concealed in coded transactions, are now spoken aloud in trembling voices. Not rumors, but confessions. Under the harsh glare of truth, there is no place left to hide. The voices they once silenced, they are now the narrators of the story they tried to bury. And this time, the picture they are painting is clear, undeniable, and damning. They thought they had erased every trace. They were certain the past had been rewritten, the evidence destroyed, the footprints covered. But the past is not so easily erased, because truth has a way of leaving footprints. The paper trails they believed had vanished, they are resurfacing. The phone records they swore had been erased, they are being retrieved. The hidden transactions buried under layers of deception, they are coming to light. It only takes one misplaced document to expose everything, one overlooked detail, one anonymous voice brave enough to break the silence, one thread, and the entire tapestry begins to unravel. Does this not remind you of Haman's downfall in the book of Esther? A man who thought his power was absolute, who built gallows for the innocent, believing himself untouchable. Yet the very trap he set became his own undoing. Esther 7:10. His arrogance made him blind to the cracks forming beneath his feet. And when the truth came to light, there was no escape. This is the pattern of history. Pride blinds, and deception always collapses under its own weight. Consider Richard Nixon, once the most powerful man in the world. He believed his secrets were buried, his influence untouchable. But all it took was a single recording, a tape he thought was insignificant, to bring down the presidency. The fortress of lies he built did not protect him. It trapped him. And so it is now. Fear was always their greatest weapon. They ruled through intimidation, silencing opposition before it could even form. But fear is fickle. It bends, it shifts, and now it has turned against them. The whispers in the shadows are no longer of loyalty, but of escape. The same hands that once built their empire are now dismantling it, brick by brick. The ones who once carried out their orders in silence are now naming names, exposing secrets, tearing down the illusion. The tide has turned. Because truth cannot be contained forever, they thought they were in control, but they never accounted for the God who sees all. For nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known and brought to light. Luke 8:17. This is no longer a slow erosion. This is the flood they never saw coming. The ones who once swore unwavering loyalty are now speaking. The ones who guarded their secrets with unshakable silence are cutting deals, some out of desperation, others out of vengeance. But the truth? It doesn't care about motives. It only cares that it is finally free. For so long, they believed they controlled the story. They dictated what was spoken, what was silenced, what was rewritten. They bent reality to their will, convinced that with enough influence, enough intimidation, enough carefully placed distractions, they could sculpt the truth into whatever they needed it to be. But they forgot one thing. The author of truth does not require their permission to reveal what was always there. And now, they are no longer the ones holding the pen. This is not just an inconvenient day. This is not just an unfortunate turn of events. This is judgment. The walls they trusted have turned against them. The doors they locked have been thrown wide open. The fortress they built is crumbling from the inside out. And the worst part? They know there's no escape, no rewriting, no hiding, no way out. They thought they could bury the truth. But the grave was never deep enough. Because the descent is never sudden. It doesn't begin with a loud explosion. It starts in the background, in subtle shifts, in whispers barely heard. A name surfaces in a report. A meeting ends with an uneasy silence. A trusted ally suddenly avoids their calls. And then, like dominoes, it all collapses. The foundation cracks. The ones who once walked in lockstep, in perfect synchronization, begin to drift. Some flee before the tide consumes them. Some betray, exchanging loyalty for self-preservation. Some simply disappear, knowing there is no way to survive what is coming. The ones who once commanded fear now wait for calls that never come. The powerful who once controlled the game have watched the board flip before their eyes. The forces they used as shields now refuse to answer. The powerful allies who once covered them now sever ties, unwilling to be dragged down with them, because loyalty is the first thing to burn when the fire spreads. Does this not remind you of King Saul's fall? A man once anointed by God, surrounded by the highest authority in the land, yet brought to ruin by his own choices. The very people who once celebrated him turned away. His most trusted warrior David became his greatest threat. And in the end, Saul stood alone, his power gone, his kingdom lost, his allies scattered. 1 Samuel 31, 1-6. History repeats itself. Those who build their empires on deception always fall. Consider Enron, once one of the most powerful corporations in the world. They manipulated numbers, controlled narratives, silenced doubters, until one whistleblower exposed the truth. Then, like dominoes, everything unraveled. The people who once stood together scattered in different directions, each trying to save themselves. But it was too late. The illusion had shattered, and so it is now. They built their empire on the illusion of invincibility, convinced that the right connections, the right amount of money, the right levers of power would keep them untouchable. But illusions can only hold for so long, and when they shatter, there is no putting them back together, for there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known and brought to light. Luke 8:17. This is not the end of the story, but for them, it is the end of the illusion. The reckoning is no longer a distant storm on the horizon. It is here. It is knocking at the door. The names they swore would never be spoken are now headlines plastered across the world. The transactions they buried are now open ledgers, scrutinized by eyes they can no longer evade. The carefully crafted lies they built their empire upon have collapsed under the crushing weight of unrelenting truth. They are not just losing influence, they are losing everything. No more exits, no more safety nets, no more control. For years they rewrote the rules, reshaped reality, bent the world to their will. They convinced themselves that power belonged only to those bold enough to seize it, that they could manipulate history and dictate the future with enough wealth, enough leverage, enough carefully placed hands in high places. But reality has no master. It does not forget. It does not erase. And it never lets them walk away unscathed. The wicked flee when no one pursues, but the righteous are bold as a lion. Proverbs 28:1. They moved like ghosts, ruling from the shadows, invisible hands pulling every string, orchestrating every move. They played the game behind the curtain, untouchable, unseen, convinced that their dominion would last forever. They walked as kings, dictating destinies, crushing opposition before it could even rise. But pride always comes before the fall. Did Nebuchadnezzar not believe himself invincible? Did he not gaze upon his vast kingdom and declare, "Is this not the great Babylon I have built as my royal residence, by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?" Daniel 4:30. But his pride led to his humiliation. Driven from his throne, stripped of his sanity, reduced to a man wandering like a beast, until he finally acknowledged that all power belongs to God alone. And so it is now. History does not favor those who believe themselves above judgment. Think of Harvey Weinstein, once an untouchable force in Hollywood. For decades he operated in secrecy, protected by wealth, influence, and fear. But when the first voice spoke, the dam burst. The whispers turned into shouts, the hidden became exposed, and in the end, he lost everything. They believed they were above consequence, but now the same shadows they ruled from have turned against them. And when the final chapter of this story is written, it will not be a tale of power and dominance. It will be a warning, a reminder that no fortress built on lies can stand forever. For years, they shaped reality to fit their will, altering history, silencing those who dared to resist, and manipulating every move to ensure they always held the upper hand. They were the masters of deception, weaving illusions so seamlessly that the world accepted their falsehoods as truth. In their minds, control was not just a privilege, but an unshakable birthright. They operated under the belief that rules were meant for others, not for them. That no matter the opposition, they would always dictate the final outcome. But control is only control when the world believes in the illusion. And now, no one believes anymore. The unraveling began subtly, almost imperceptibly. A quiet murmur in the distance, a lone figure breaking ranks, a piece of information slipping through the cracks, a document that couldn't be erased, a financial discrepancy that couldn't be ignored. At first, they dismissed these as minor inconveniences, brushing them aside with laughter and arrogance. But a single crack in the foundation, no matter how small, is the beginning of collapse. They had spent their lives building a fortress they believed was indestructible, yet now the walls are crumbling from within. And once the fall begins, nothing can stop it. Their first instinct is to flee. The same people who once claimed to be untouchable now scramble for escape. Private jets are fueled in secrecy. Hidden pathways, once used for control, now become desperate exits. Frantic phone calls are placed in hushed tones, messages encoded with urgency. They had always kept a door open for themselves, a way out, just in case. But what happens when every escape route is blocked? The men who once controlled entire industries now watch as their wealth vanishes before their eyes. The accounts they hid offshore, frozen. The luxurious estates they fortified, seized. The trusted allies who once swore loyalty now refuse to answer their calls. They reach out to those who had once guarded their secrets, only to be met with silence. They believed power was eternal, that the empire they built would stand unchallenged. But power is only as strong as those who sustain it, and now those who once bowed before them have turned their backs. Does this not sound eerily familiar? Have we not seen this same fall before? The mighty brought low, the proud stripped of their illusions. King Nebuchadnezzar, ruler of Babylon, once stood on the highest throne, declaring himself untouchable. Is not this the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence, by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty? Daniel 4:30. But in an instant, his kingdom was taken from him. His pride turned to humiliation as he was driven away, reduced to living like a wild beast. He thought his power was permanent, but he learned that true dominion belongs to God alone. Even in modern times, we have seen powerful figures who believed they were above consequence, only to watch their influence crumble overnight. Think of those who once commanded industries, governments, or entire nations. Leaders whose names were spoken with reverence, yet now are whispered with disgrace. They built their empires on sand, only to watch them washed away. So the question is, what about you? Are you witnessing this shift? Do you see the mighty trembling, the powerful losing their grip? If history, both biblical and worldly, has shown us anything, it is that no kingdom built on deception can stand. No fortress built on oppression can endure. And when the fall comes, it is swift, it is final, and it is absolute. And now, one by one, they are being abandoned. The same people who once stood at their side, who carried out their will without question, are now walking away. Some still try to hold their ground, clinging to power with desperate hands. They issue statements filled with hollow words, attempting to shape the narrative once more. They create distractions, stirring up chaos in the hopes of diverting attention. They pour money into a battle that cannot be bought, throwing fortunes into a fire that refuses to die. They threaten, they bribe, they twist the story in every direction, but nothing works. Why? Because fear is no longer their ally. Once their very presence commanded obedience. A glance, a word, a whispered warning, enough to make entire nations kneel. People lowered their heads, too afraid to resist, too afraid to speak. But that fear is gone. Where submission once ruled, now defiance stands unshaken. Where deception once silenced the truth, now only truth remains. This isn't just an unfortunate shift in power. It isn't a minor setback. This is the end. No more hidden corridors where decisions are made behind closed doors. No more secret meetings where futures are bought and sold. No more carefully orchestrated plans unfolding in their favor. The game has ended and they have lost. Some refuse to accept it. They believe they can claw their way back, reaching into the shadows for the power that once sustained them. They throw money at problems that can no longer be solved with wealth. They whisper threats into the void, but the weight behind their words has vanished. Their enforcers, the ones who once carried out their orders without hesitation, have disappeared, captured, missing, or too afraid to be seen. The allies they once commanded are erasing them from memory, severing ties, pretending the association never existed. The calls they make go unanswered. No one is coming to their rescue. Others scramble in panic, desperate to shift the blame. They rewrite their own stories, hoping to craft a new identity before the dust settles. They flood the airwaves with denials, portraying themselves as victims, spinning elaborate conspiracies to cover their tracks. They turn on their own people, offering them up as scapegoats, hoping that a sacrifice will buy them time. But the world isn't listening. The truth is too clear, too overwhelming to manipulate. Every excuse falls flat. Every cover story collapses under the weight of undeniable reality. This is not a temporary crisis. This is judgment unfolding before their eyes. Can you see it? Do you recognize this moment in history? Time and time again, the mighty have fallen this way. The Pharaoh of Egypt, who believed his rule was absolute, chased the children of Israel into the Red Sea, only to watch his army swallowed by the waters. Exodus 14:28. King Herod, who sought to silence the truth by murdering the innocent, met an end so gruesome that even his followers abandoned his name. Acts 12:23. Even in modern times, we have seen powerful figures, once untouchable, once feared, brought to ruin by their own arrogance. Think of the corporate moguls, the political rulers, the so-called untouchables who built their lives on deception, only to watch everything crumble. So what does this mean for you? If God's justice is moving, if the truth is rising where lies once ruled, what role are you meant to play? Are you standing firm in truth, or have you been tempted to believe the illusion? Because when the collapse begins, it does not stop. And when judgment comes, it is final. No strategy, no last-minute maneuver, no whispered deal in the dark will undo what has already begun. The reckoning they never believed in, the judgment they arrogantly dismissed, is now unfolding before their eyes. The structure they built, crafted with such precision, maintained with ruthless control, is collapsing into ruin. This is not just another challenge to overcome. This is not a test of resilience, a moment to regroup and strike back. This is the end of an empire that believed itself invincible, the end of an illusion that blinded so many for so long. No more backroom bargains where futures were sold behind closed doors. No more secret alliances where loyalty was a currency traded for power. No more control over the minds and hearts of those they manipulated. The illusion has shattered, and all that remains is the smoldering wreckage of a kingdom that was never meant to last. And now all they can do is watch as it burns to the ground. The balance is shifting. For too long they ruled with iron fists, shaping reality to fit their desires. They carved out dominion from deception, dictating who would rise and who would be cast aside. They silenced voices, altered narratives, and tilted the scales to serve only themselves. They constructed a system so rigged, so meticulously designed in their favor, that they believed it could never turn against them. But nothing lasts forever. The fortress of secrecy, the unchecked authority, the power to erase opposition without consequence, has collapsed. The thing they worshipped above all else, the control they wielded as if it were divine right, has slipped from their grasp like sand through their fingers. And what of those they sought to erase? They never disappeared, they never faltered, they endured, mocked, ridiculed, labeled as outcasts, called foolish for holding on to the truth, forced into the shadows, made to doubt their own reality. Yet through it all, they were never broken. Does this not remind you of the story of Joseph, sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused, imprisoned, forgotten by the world? Yet, even in the depths of his suffering, God's favor never left him. The very ones who cast him aside were forced to bow before him when God raised him up. Genesis 41:41-43. They were never alone, even when the world sought to make them feel abandoned, even when the walls closed in and the darkness seemed absolute. God was there, and now the moment of restoration has come. They did not fall. They waited. They adapted, and now they rise. How often have we seen this same divine reversal throughout history? The oppressed becoming the liberators, the silenced becoming the loudest voices of truth. Nelson Mandela, imprisoned for 27 years, emerged not as a bitter man, but as the leader who would dismantle apartheid. Harriet Tubman, once a slave, became the force that led hundreds to freedom. They too were ridiculed, they too were dismissed, but they never stopped moving forward. So the question is, what about you? You who have been cast aside. You who have been forced to question your worth, made to feel small in a world that seemed too powerful to defy. Can you feel it? The shift, the turning of the tide, the rise of those who were once unseen. Because the truth cannot stay hidden forever. And when God moves, no force in the world can stop what he has set in motion. What was taken is being restored. Not just material wealth, not just influence, but something far more valuable, something that cannot be measured in gold or counted in numbers. The freedom to exist without fear, the ability to create without restriction, the right to speak without the heavy chains of suppression wrapped around every word. For so long, they held the world captive. They decided what could be said, what could be built, what could even be imagined. They ruled through fear, through control, through an illusion so powerful that many believed it to be unbreakable. But what happens when those shackles are turned against the very ones who forged them? The air hums with change, unstoppable, irreversible. The falsehoods they wove so meticulously are unraveling. The deception they upheld for generations is crumbling beneath the crushing weight of undeniable truth. The very fear that once fueled their reign, the fear that kept others silent, now gnaws at their own heels. It turns against them, consuming the last fragile remnants of the illusion they so desperately cling to. Desperation lingers in their final moves. They scramble to rebuild what has already turned to dust. They twist narratives, manipulate the airwaves, grasping for a control that no longer exists. But the spell is broken, the deception laid bare. The fortress they built was never as strong as they believed. It was built on borrowed time, and that time has now run out. Do you see it? Do you feel it? The shifting of the tide? The powerful always believe their reign will last forever. Pharaoh believed that he could keep the Israelites enslaved indefinitely. He hardened his heart against God's warnings, thinking his empire was invincible. Yet when the final plague fell, when judgment arrived, not even the might of Egypt could stop it. Exodus 12:29-31. The greatest ruler of his time was reduced to pleading for those he once enslaved to leave. History has always repeated itself. The fall of the mighty is inevitable when they build their thrones on oppression. Think of the great empires that once seemed untouchable. Rome, with its vast dominion, crumbled under its own corruption. The Soviet Union, once feared, collapsed almost overnight, leaving its leaders powerless. No kingdom built on lies, fear, or greed has ever stood the test of time. So why would this time be any different? The clock has struck its final hour. The tide has turned. The long night has ended, and as the last echoes of their rule fade into nothing, a new dawn rises, unstoppable, unchallenged, undeniable, and you are standing in it. Can you see what is unfolding before your eyes? Because this is not just a shift in power, this is a divine awakening. The world is watching, the heavens are moving, and those who were once cast aside are stepping into the light. As we close today's message, I want you to reflect on one undeniable truth. Even when it feels like life has stripped everything away from you, God's purpose for your life remains unshaken. Yes, you may have faced loss, hardship, and moments when it felt like all was taken from you, but God is in the midst of it all, working behind the scenes. He has never forgotten you, and He is using everything you've gone through to prepare you for the greater things He has in store. Your story isn't over, and no matter how lost you may feel in this moment, God is still writing it. The same God who lifted up the Israelites, who delivered David from Goliath, and who restored Job's fortunes, He is with you today. Trust in His timing, lean into His presence, and remember that your journey is not about what you've lost, but about what God is building in you for the future. If this message has touched your heart and you feel led to give, I encourage you to donate through the Super Thanks button. Your support helps us continue to spread the word and reach more people with the hope and truth of God's love. Whether you decide to donate or not, I am truly grateful for each and every one of you. Your presence here means so much. Please take a moment to like this video, share it with friends or family who need encouragement, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future messages. Your comments are always welcome and cherished, so feel free to share your thoughts or ask any questions you may have. May God's abundant blessings pour into your life, and may He restore everything that was lost. You are His chosen one, and He is with you every step of the way. Keep walking in faith, for your breakthrough is near. Thank you again for being a part of this community. Stay blessed.